Hello friends, I'm Heather O'Marjo. Today I'm talking about something different. Today I want to address addiction and recovery. And I'm very open and honest about the fact that I'm in recovery from addiction. I'm coming up on 6 years. I'm 5 years clean and sober from drugs and alcohol. And I have also worked very hard at recovery from mental illness. And so often I put myself out there and I'm honest and vulnerable about this because I want to be able to help other people who are struggling with those issues. And if they see me as someone they can come and talk to about it, because she's already been through it, then I feel like that's a great way to open up communication. What's interesting to me though is more often than the addicts and the people suffering from addiction and mental health issues coming to me is their families come to me and say my brother, sister, cousin, wife, husband is dealing with addiction issues. How do I fix them? And I just wanted to talk on this because it's a valid concern and a point. Living with someone who has an addiction causes everyone to become sick. So this isn't something you want to shame the addict for, but it just results in everyone creating maladaptive behaviors to try and cope with living in the unstable environment of an addict or an addiction or mental health. So it's like walking on eggshells, bargaining and creating ultimatums, cleaning up their mess for them, self-blame, blaming them. All of these are symptoms of the codependency of the addict and the non-addict. So if you're aware that you are in a relationship like this with anyone, parent, spouse, child, even coworkers, really, you want to acknowledge your part in it. So what does that mean? And that means like you have started to develop maladaptive behaviors and they are harmful to yourself, harmful to the relationship, and potentially exacerbating the problem of the addict, right? So I want to encourage you to lead by example. If you want to help your loved one to recover from an addiction, the very first thing I will always suggest people do is self-care. Deal with yourself first. Go to groups like Al-Anon, which is a 12-step recovery program with a spiritual foundation, not religious. And their focus is to work through the 12 steps of recovery in relation to how you interact with the addict. You need to get into recovery from the maladaptive behaviors, the harmful feelings, everything that's involved with a codependent relationship. You need to own your part in that and recover from it and have support and healing around it. And when you lead by example and when you're able to tell them, hey, I'm changing my behavior and this is how I'm doing it, and it is available to you too, family, friend, loved one, through any of the anonymous programs. Alcoholics Anonymous is my go-to. But any of the anonymous programs are free, are open to anyone who wants to recover. There are non-spiritual programs like Smart Recovery here in Calgary. I don't know if they're national, but they're based on cognitive behavior therapy. It's coffee. And so I'm always here. If you need someone to talk to, I will listen. I will also recommend David's Pathway to Freedom now has a additional program that has just newly been written for family and friends of addicts and the codependent behaviors that come from that. And he's offered it as a private service to people who have family members who are addicts and in recovery and not in recovery at different levels, right? And so, I also, like, one of the things that I'm struggling with Foodscapes is my desire is to like, I understand what helped me come into recovery and rebuild my life. And so I really feel it's important for me to have the opportunity to hire marginalized people who don't fit in that 9-to-5 box. I can't fit in that 9-to-5 box. And I want to be able to create a job and employment space for people like me who are in recovery from addiction and mental health. There are people who are coming out of jail who want to change their life and want to rehabilitate. There are underemployed people who are in the GLBTQ spectrum, who are Indigenous. These are all people who are the least likely to get the jobs and need it the most, right? And I know that Earthworks is a really healing task. So if it's our job, that's a great thing. But when I bring this up to people, I say, oh, we want our Earthworks component to be marginalized people. There's immediately a backup and say, I don't want recovering addicts on my property. I don't want ex-cons on my property. They might hurt me. And it's really hard for me to connect with them in a way that explains that your fears are valid. And we will have programs that address those behaviors and tries to help them rehabilitate from it. But how are people supposed to get to a place of recovery from addiction, crime, mental health, isolation, if they can't access jobs? If you're not willing to hire them and help them get beyond that and build a new life, how are they supposed to rehabilitate? And asking people to look at, what stigma and bias exists in your mind when you think of a person in recovery, a person coming out of jail. Society has told us that they're the unsavable, the perpetually doomed portion of society which is never going to get well, and we shouldn't even bother with them. That is what society has told us through the Just Say No to Drugs programs and the war against drugs. That's what we've been told. And it's not true. It's not. The best way to help people is to give them the opportunities and the skills and the motivations to change their life. Lead by example. If I have a job for somebody who's just coming out of jail and never wants to go back there, then they are less likely to go back to jail because they'll have a job, they'll have a sense of pride, they'll have skills and employment and the opportunity to expand their future. If they don't have that job, they will be more likely to go back to jail. And women, specifically Indigenous women, are the most likely to end up in jail because they have the least amount of support for when they come out. They have the least number of jobs available to them, resources available to them. They are vulnerable. They end up in the sex trade, they end up in the drug circuits because that's all they know. And then, life becomes a cycle unless we interrupt it. And that's really in my heart of to what we want to do with Not Off Foodscapes and how we want to end that cycle. So thank you for taking the time to listen. I know I've gone on for a while. I appreciate your support and taking the time to listen. Please feel free to share this video. Mwah.